Snow whipped across the ridges of Kandahar, biting through layers of wool and leather, carrying with it the distant rattle of tent flaps and the hollow creak of supply wagons buried in frost. In the frozen darkness of December 1943, the interpreter moved between camps with quiet purpose, his breath forming clouds that vanished into the night, eyes scanning for movements that others would not notice. He stepped lightly over frozen mud, past discarded weapons and frost-bitten footprints, pausing at each command post to translate hushed conversations, his words bridging fear and obedience, life and death. The soldiers whispered his presence like a shadow at the edge of the firelight. Never fully seen, yet always felt a figure half human, half myth, moving between tents and watchfires with silent urgency. One night, as lanterns flickered and wind howled through the valley, he entered a tent to deliver coded instructions, and in a moment no one could describe, he vanished, leaving only a notebook smeared with half-dried ink and symbols no one could decipher. Outside, the wind carried fragments of voices in foreign tongues, drifting between tents, bending around snow-laden walls, leaving chills on spines and questions that no official report could answer. The officers checked the logs and patrol reports, noting singular disappearance and coordinates unknown. But the fear was heavier than the words, pressing into the bones of every man who had seen or thought they had seen the interpreter moving between shadows. Locals spoke of him in whispers, a figure who appeared on ridges at twilight, sometimes reflected in pools of water, sometimes barely visible behind smoke from cooking fires, always watching, always present, yet never fully there. Some soldiers claimed they woke to find messages scratched into wooden posts, warnings that made no sense yet hinted at danger looming beyond sight, while others swore footprints appeared and vanished in the snow with no pattern defying logic and leaving the imagination to run wild. Eyewitnesses disagreed endlessly. One swore he had seen the interpreter walk into the darkness toward the mountains. Another insisted he had stepped through the main gate and simply disappeared as if swallowed by the desert wind itself. Throughout the night, distant sounds echoed hooves, gunfire voices in languages unspoken, melding with the whispering wind, weaving a tapestry of fear, uncertainty, and an unseen presence that seemed to know every soldier's secret thought. By dawn, the outpost bore signs of absence. An empty chair at the command table, coats hung askew, notebooks open on desks, ink smudged across maps that now seemed meaningless, and an emptiness more profound than the cold that had settled into every corner of the camp. Some believed he had crossed into a liminal space, neither here nor there, a man caught between worlds, carrying secrets that could not survive daylight, leaving behind only fragments of a story meant to haunt. Others whispered darker possibilities, taken by forces unseen, hunted by those who knew his translations, or claimed by the desert itself, which remembered him in wind-whipped shadows, in shifting snow, and in the faint echo of voices that no one else could hear. And yet the interpreter's presence lingered in frost-lined footprints, in whispered warnings, in notebooks half-written, and in every man's memory, as though the desert itself refused to let his story fade into silence. December 1943. Kandahar. Outpost sprawled like a frozen scar across the jagged ridges, tents sagging under layers of ice and snow, the wind slicing through every gap with a bitter bite. Soldiers trudged through knee-deep snow boots, crunching rifles slung heavily, breath-forming clouds that danced, then vanished into the pale dawn. Each patrol moved with cautious precision, eyes scanning distant ridges, where shadows shifted like living things, every gust of wind carrying the possibility of ambush. Inside the command tent, maps lay sprawled across tables, ink smudged by frozen fingers, candles flickering as officers whispered strategies, the interpreter leaning over silently translating nuances in tone, warning of subtleties no one else could grasp. Outside, a horse whinnied nervously, pawing at frozen mud, breath rising in misty plumes, as if sensing the tension that clung to every man and every ridge. A messenger ducked into a tent, shivering, handing a folded dispatch to the interpreter, who traced the lines of text with careful eyes, murmuring words that carried weight beyond comprehension. Smoke from cooking fires drifted lazily into the sky, curling around tents, and freezing instantly, carrying with it the scent of stew, horse, and the faint metallic tang of fear. Tribal elders gathered near the outskirts, cloaked in furs, eyes flicking toward the outpost, speaking in hushed tones of omens, seen in wind patterns, shifting sands and fleeting shadows, stories. The interpreter listened to and recorded with painstaking care. The sun dipped behind the western ridge, turning the snow to silver and blue, casting long, distorted shadows that crept across the camp like fingers making every soldier feel watched. Lanterns were lit inside tents, their light trembling over frost-lined walls, revealing letters, half-written notes of tribal alliances, patrol schedules, and cryptic symbols that might save lives or end them. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the encampment, rattling tent poles, scattering ash from small fires and carrying voices in languages unknown, each syllable striking fear and fascination into the hearts of men. The interpreter moved with deliberate calm between tents, hood-drawn, notebook clutched, stepping lightly over discarded supplies, observing gestures, overhearing secrets, and translating words whose meaning could shift life and death. Some soldiers swore they glimpsed him on the ridges at twilight, pale against the snow, motionless, yet somehow observing everything. Others claimed he was always just out of reach, a shadow dancing at the edge of sight. Every encounter with locals, every translation carried invisible stakes. A single misinterpreted phrase could lead to ambush, bloodshed, or betrayal. The interpreter's understanding of human nuance was the thin line between survival and disaster. As night fell, fully distant, howls echoed down valleys. Gunfire in the distance crackled intermittently, and the interpreter's presence felt like a tether between the chaos outside and the fragile order inside the camp. By midnight, even seasoned soldiers whispered about footprints that seemed to appear and vanish in the snow, without cause, the flicker of lanterns catching shadows that made no sense. The interpreter paused near the edge of the camp, listening to murmurs among the elders, scribbling into his notebook, with hands stiff from cold, knowing that each word might carry consequences far beyond anyone's understanding. Every sound, the flapping of canvas, the creak of wagons, the crunch of snow became amplified in the eerie stillness, building a tension that no soldier could shake and no candle could chase away. And through it all, the interpreter moved unseen and seen a man whose very presence held the camp together, whose absence, even for a moment, would unravel more than maps, more than orders. It would unravel certainty itself. Official logs meticulously recorded the interpreter's assignments. Unit 14 coordinates unknown after December 12th, yet the entries were crossed out in places, ink smudged as if someone feared the words might reveal too much. Patrol reports describe him moving silently between tents and outposts, notebook in hand, translating conversations so precise that commanders acted on instructions before fully understanding them themselves. A soldier's diary notes, he walks like a shadow, voice calm, eyes sharp, a man who sees all yet shows nothing. I trust him more than my own orders. Supply ledgers show discrepancies, rations, missing footprints in the snow leading to nowhere, horses restless in the night gear found shifted or broken with no explanation. Telegram reports reference him indirectly, message delivered. Interpreter not present on return, outcome uncertain. No name, no signature. Yet results arrived exactly as predicted. Notebooks recovered contained cryptic symbols, shorthand, and maps annotated in a code soldiers could not decipher. edges burned as if intentionally obscured, leaving fragments of truth scattered across pages. Eyewitnesses told contradictory stories. One soldier claimed he saw the interpreter approach enemy positions, vanish behind a ridge, and reappear miles away, while another swore he never left camp. The commanding officer's journal described singular disappearance, fate unknown. The man was here, then gone, leaving no trace but whispers of deeds completed, impossible yet recorded. Maps with patrol routes later showed lines shifted overnight, erased markers and additions that could not have been drawn by any known hand, as if guided by someone unseen. Letters sent to Allied units contained cryptic phrases, "The shadow moves," warnings delivered, "Trust the words, not the form." Soldiers puzzled over the meaning, yet all outcomes were accurate. Photographs from the camp show tense, snow-laden ridges and soldiers at work, yet the interpreter is absent from every frame. Only footprints, sometimes clear, sometimes blurred. Medical logs noted frostbite and exhaustion in men, yet the interpreter remained unaffected, moving tirelessly through snow, mud, and wind that crippled the rest of the unit. Intercepted messages suggested someone was passing intelligence to tribal leaders. Always accurate, always timely, but the courier's identity remained unknown. Patrols reported anomalies, footprints crossing paths without meeting snow, disrupted inconsistently, with human movement horses reacting to invisible presence. Even enemy intelligence vaguely referenced him, interpreter present, messages delivered, outcome uncertain, without naming him, confirming impact, but hiding identity. Soldiers' diaries recorded conversations in languages unknown to anyone but the interpreter. Decisions were made solely on his translations, trusting that his understanding surpassed their own. Logs describe the night of December 12th patrol sent to Ridge 7B, interpreter accompanies, never returns. Soldiers report hearing voices, distant gunfire, then a silence that settled like a weight. Official reports concluded fate unknown, disappearance unexplained, yet no search yielded him no trace beyond notebooks, smudged ink, footprints in snow. Even decades later, historians found contradictions in times, locations, entries, suggesting someone or something moved faster, farther unseen by all. Every fact, footprints, delivered messages, reactions of men and animals pointed to an anomaly, defying standard wartime explanation, leaving a lingering unease in the archives themselves. Ledger books supply manifests. Patrol notes all hinted at his presence and influence. Yet no document explained who he was, what he did, or where he went, leaving shadows of doubt. The weight of evidence pressed on every reader, precise translations, timely warnings, unexplained movements, footprints appearing and disappearing. A pattern that seemed alive, intentional, and impossible. Even official correspondence referenced the unseen messenger, never naming him yet, acknowledging his role in critical decisions. The line between fact and legend blurred. Soldiers' letters home mention whispers among tense sightings at the ridge, voices carried by the wind. Small details that formed a tapestry of fear, awe, and fascination. Command logs note repeated discrepancies, patrols arriving ahead of schedule messages, delivered without visible courier notes, written in languages unrecognizable, yet perfectly executed. Every document, every entry, every notation reinforced one certainty: the interpreter's presence shaped outcomes in ways no one fully understood, yet vanished without explanation. The outpost's routine continued, yet every soldier felt the tension of absence, the weight of unexplained events. Notebooks, half-opened ink, smeared pages crossed out, traces of intelligence that might save or doom. The villagers spoke of a figure who appeared at the edge of twilight, stepping silently across frozen courtyards, his cloak blending with shadows, as if the darkness itself obeyed him. Children claimed to see him standing on the ridge above the outpost, motionless, yet always watching, their eyes wet, as he seemed to melt into the snow with every blink of the eye. Around flickering campfires, soldiers whispered stories of him delivering messages that changed the course of skirmishes, appearing in one tent, vanishing in another, leaving no footprints but the impression of presence. Some elders insisted he could speak to the wind, commanding it to carry voices, warnings, and cryptic signals to those who needed them, the gusts forming words only they could hear. On moonlit nights, the shadows along the ridges seemed to twist unnaturally, as if alive, following his movements, whispering secrets of ambushes, safe paths, and unseen dangers to the soldiers below. Villagers claimed that horses refused to cross certain patches of snow where he had walked, pawing the frozen ground, nervously, ears flicking toward invisible threats, shivering, as if sensing something beyond human comprehension. Tales grew darker. The interpreter was said to step between the worlds of the living and the unseen, negotiating with spirits, guiding lost travelers, and warning of enemies long before any human reconnaissance could detect them. Soldiers' diaries recorded fleeting glimpses of him in reflections of ice and polished metal, sometimes taller, sometimes thinner, shifting like smoke, leaving men uncertain if they had truly seen him or merely imagined his presence. Campfires caught glimpses of objects he carried that would vanish into the night, only to appear later in precise locations where their contents became critical to survival or strategy. Some locals claimed he had learned the secret language of mountain spirits, using it to calm storms, mislead enemies, and ensure the safety of those who trusted his guidance, though no human eye could verify these events. Every encounter became legend, shadows, bending unnaturally, footsteps, crossing snow in impossible patterns, whispers carried through tents that predicted events yet to come, and soldiers left in awe and fear. It was said that on the coldest nights the wind itself spoke through him, translating tribal warnings, enemy movements, and unseen threats, leaving a residue of mystery in the minds of all who listened. Stories spread that he could vanish entirely, yet his voice remained, guiding patrols, warning commanders, and influencing outcomes from places no one could reach, a phantom whose power was as practical as it was impossible. Some elders described seeing the interpreter near sacred grounds at night, moving silently among ancient stones, tracing symbols with his fingers in the frost, as if negotiating with forces older than war. Even enemy scouts reported anomalies, footprints appearing and disappearing without trace, to sudden changes in patrol patterns, and the sense of being observed by someone who should not exist. Soldiers whispered of a shadowed guide who could appear on ridges, in tents, or along patrol lines, giving warnings in languages none could recognize, leaving only the echo of commands and the feeling that survival depended on following them. Children, soldiers, and elders alike claimed that the interpreter's presence could be felt even when unseen, a chill in the air, a shift in the wind, a fleeting silhouette at the edge of vision signaling that he was near. Folklore merged with reality. Reports of delivered messages, precise movements, and unseen interventions became inseparable from tales of the supernatural, creating a story that was part history, part myth, part warning. Each night the wind carried fragments of his story across the valley, whispers that mingled with the snow, echoing through tents, stirring unease and fascination, leaving every listener questioning what was real and what was shadow. The shadowed interpreter became both protector and enigma, a man whose presence could influence life and death, yet whose absence left only questions, whispers, and the haunting certainty that something beyond comprehension had walked among them. Across distant outposts, similar stories emerged, interpreters vanishing under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind messages delivered by unseen hands. Soldiers in remote valleys reported shadows moving with impossible speed, footprints appearing and disappearing voices carried by wind in languages no one recognized. Archives revealed repeated patterns, notebooks, maps, and coded messages left behind, often in exact locations where they influenced critical outcomes. Local elders spoke of the unseen messenger, a figure appearing before ambushes, guiding patrols, warning of traps, a presence felt more than seen. Across decades, reports mirrored each other: disappearance, sudden intervention, inexplicable foresight, creating a motif that transcended geography and time. In neighboring ridges, soldiers told of whispers that predicted movements of enemy forces before reconnaissance could confirm, leaving men awestruck and unnerved. The motif was consistent: the shadowed interpreter, unseen yet effective, operating between reality and legend, human and otherworldly, fact and folklore, always bridging worlds. Some patrols recorded footsteps in impossible patterns, crossing snow, diverging and converging in ways that defied logic, always appearing where they would be most critical. Village tales described him appearing at sacred grounds, tracing symbols in frost, negotiating unseen forces, guiding humans in ways they could not fully comprehend. Eyewitness accounts conflicted. One officer swore he saw him vanish into a snowstorm and reappear at a distant ridge. Another claimed he delivered a critical note without ever being observed leaving camp. Patterns emerged, messages always reached the right hands. Warnings were always timely, and his presence or absence was always felt at pivotal moments. The wind carried similar whispers in other regions: shadows moving across ridges, voices delivering instructions, figures vanishing and reappearing as if the desert itself was alive. Even enemy logs hinted at unexplained events. Patrols avoided ambushes. Positions shifted. Messages reached commanders without identifiable couriers. Folklore intertwined with fact reports of delivered instructions, precise interventions, and unseen influence became inseparable from tales of a spectral messenger. Stories crossed over generations. Locals spoke of him guiding soldiers and villagers alike, ensuring survival, warning of danger, yet never fully revealing himself. This motif repeated in other campaigns: interpreters disappearing, messages delivered by invisible hands, shadows moving where no one should tread, leaving evidence that puzzled historians. Observers reported feeling his presence before seeing him, a chill in the air. Subtle shifts in snow or the fleeting echo of a voice carrying orders or warnings. Patterns of disappearance, unseen guidance, and survival created a symbolic thread across war zones, tying events together under the motif of the shadowed intermediary. Each occurrence mirrored the previous one: man, always unseen, shaping outcomes, delivering messages, walking between worlds, leaving traces only those attuned could interpret. The motif connected isolated incidents into a narrative that spanned decades, mountains and valleys, forming a tapestry of mystery, legend, and undeniable impact. Even historians acknowledged the pattern: fact layered with folklore, reality mingled with myth, and always the shadowed figure influencing events beyond comprehension. Every camp, every ridge, every whisper reinforced the bridge between worlds. Human decisions, supernatural influence, and the enduring question: was he a man or something more? Night descended on Kandahar, covering the outpost in a thick, icy darkness, wind rattling tents and whipping snow into swirling patterns that seemed to move with a mind of their own. Footsteps appeared in the snow where no patrol had walked, curving around tents, then vanishing abruptly at the ridge, leaving soldiers staring in disbelief at tracks that defied logic. A flare ignited briefly on a distant hill, revealing a tall figure moving silently across the frozen valley, then dissolving into shadows before anyone could focus their eyes. In the command tent, notebooks lay, open pages smeared with ink, and scratched-out symbols, cryptic messages, half-written, each line hinting at movements, dangers, and warnings that no one fully understood. Soldiers whispered of voices in languages they could not comprehend, instructions carried on the wind, guiding them safely around unseen dangers, yet no source could be identified. A patrol sent to Ridge 7B vanished for hours, returning with tales of seeing the interpreter step into a snowstorm, only to emerge miles away delivering critical messages, leaving men questioning reality itself. Footprints led to the edge of cliffs, stopping suddenly in untouched snow, as if the man had walked off the earth, leaving only the memory of his presence. An officer swore he saw the interpreter standing in the open field, fading slowly as his shadow stretched unnaturally across the frozen ground, elongating and twisting like smoke in moonlight. Maps and logs were discovered the next morning, with routes altered, markers erased, and new paths drawn that perfectly matched enemy movements no one could have predicted. A distant scream echoed from the northern ridge, mixing with whispers, making soldiers question whether they had heard an enemy patrol or a warning from the unseen messenger himself. Firelight flickered across snow-dusted tents, illuminating journals filled with cryptic symbols, tribal codes, and pages that seemed to pulse with significance, urging action without explanation. Horses in the stables stamped and neighed, ears twitching toward empty spaces, their breath rising in frosty clouds, sensing a presence invisible but undeniably real. Soldiers' letters described hallucinations, fleeting figures at tent edges, voices in the wind, shadows moving independently of light, yet perfectly correlating with actual events that unfolded moments later. Eyewitness accounts conflicted violently. Some claimed he walked through walls, others said he disappeared into the snow, yet both accounts coincided with messages delivered flawlessly. In the command tent, papers were scattered, maps, misaligned candles, extinguished, and the eerie feeling of someone or something passing deliberately through the room, unseen but omnipresent. A notebook, half buried in snow, was discovered, pages frozen and soaked ink, forming strange glowing symbols under moonlight. Impossible to decipher, yet undeniably intentional. Men reported hearing their own names whispered in the gusts of wind, followed by instructions that turned out accurate, guiding them through ambushes and treacherous terrain. Sudden gunfire erupted from ridges that appeared empty moments before attacks avoided lives saved, and not a single soldier could explain how the events unfolded so precisely. Footprints crossed each other in impossible patterns, circling patrols and supply routes, always leading soldiers exactly where they needed to be, yet never revealing the traveler. The interpreter's shadow stretched and twisted across ridges, growing longer, thinner, disappearing and reappearing, leaving men questioning the solidity of their senses. Patrols recounted seeing figures move against the wind-snow, disturbed in impossible ways, tents shifting slightly, and whispers carrying vital instructions, all without a visible person present. He appeared atop ridges, tracing symbols in frost, and moments later messages would appear inside tents, maps, or dispatches guiding life-and-death decisions. Enemy scouts reported unexplainable events, patrols rerouted mysteriously, movements misdirected, and messages arriving perfectly, despite no human courier being identified. Soldiers felt his presence even when unseen, a cold gust, a fleeting silhouette, the crunch of snow with no source, and the uncanny certainty that survival depended on following his guidance. In the dead of night, the outpost became alive with unseen forces. Tents shifted, shadows danced, whispers mingled with distant gunfire, orchestrated with preternatural precision. By dawn, multiple patrols recounted events that defied logic, messages delivered, ambushes, avoided supplies, relocated, and yet the interpreter left no trace. Only footprints fading in the snow, journals with cryptic symbols, and a lingering sense of awe. The notebook maps and logs formed a puzzle that merged fact with legend, leaving men and historians alike with questions no answer could resolve, and a haunting impression that reality had bent around his presence. Every witness, soldier, and villager remembered the night as if time itself had warped events happening in impossible sequences, guided by a presence no one could fully see, yet whose influence shaped every outcome. And still the wind carried whispers of his passage, the snow held the imprint of unseen steps, and the shadow lingered silent, unseen, yet shaping the fate of soldiers' outposts and battles in ways no human could explain. Dawn broke over Kandahar, the valley bathed in pale light snow glinting across ridges, yet the interpreter was nowhere to be seen. The outpost lay quiet tents flapping softly in the morning wind, soldiers moving like shadows, eyes scanning for the unseen presence that had shaped their night. Footprints in the snow had vanished, leaving only impressions of a story that could not be fully told. Journals and notebooks lay open pages, smeared symbols, cryptic warnings, half-written decisions, guided by hands no one could identify. Whispers of his passage lingered among soldiers, a mixture of awe, fear, and disbelief, each recalling events that defied explanation. Elders spoke of the wind carrying his voice of shadows, tracing the ridges where he had walked, of messages delivered by forces unseen. Some claimed the interpreter had returned to the mountains, becoming one with the landscape, a guardian spirit invisible yet omnipresent. Others whispered darker possibilities taken by unseen forces, claimed by spirits, or vanished into realms between life and death. The outpost remained intact, patrols continued, letters delivered, missions completed. Yet every soldier felt the absence of certainty, the hollow weight of questions unanswered. Maps were consulted, logs reviewed, and still the pattern held every act of guidance, every averted disaster traced to the hand or shadow of the missing interpreter. The villagers remembered sightings at ridges and in valleys, glimpses in moonlight, whispers on the wind. The feeling of being watched, guided, protected. Even decades later, historians found discrepancies, anomalies in reports, and traces of messages that suggested he had moved faster and farther than humanly possible. The motif repeated across time and place, interpreters disappearing messages delivered by unseen hands, shadows moving at the edges of perception, shaping events in subtle but undeniable ways. Legends grew around him, the shadowed guide, the unseen messenger, a figure walking between worlds, whose presence could alter fate without revealing his form. Soldiers told stories in hushed tones, a flash of movement, a voice carried by wind, a warning that arrived just in time. The interpreter's work etched into memory, though never seen. The valley remained still, snow-glinting wind whistling through tents, carrying fragments of his story far beyond the ridge, leaving behind a tapestry of fear, awe, and unanswered questions. Every trace, every log, every whispered tale contributed to a narrative that could not be fully explained, blending history, memory, and folklore into one enduring legend. The shadow lingered in soldiers' minds, in the snow, in the wind, in journals, and in the echo of footsteps that seemed to defy reality. And yet some claimed that if one listened closely, the interpreter's voice could still be heard in the valley, offering guidance, warnings, or simply the reminder that unseen forces shape events in ways the living cannot fully perceive. The outpost moved on, but the memory remained, haunting tents, ridges, and valleys, a reminder of what was seen, what was done, and what could never be explained. No trace remained of the man himself yet. His influence endured like a shadow, stretching across time, shaping outcomes, whispering secrets, guiding those attuned to listen. And so the story ends, though not really ends, leaving the question lingering. Was he ever truly human or a shadow that walks between worlds, carrying messages meant for eyes that can never fully see? You've just witnessed another dossier from classified history. The whispers of the past are never silent. And if you wish to uncover more, follow the echoes and keep listening.